In what seemed like an abandoned building, two men were tied up inside a room. One of them apologized to the man in front of him, addressing him as Professor. The professor immediately told him not to apologize, saying it was all his fault. He regretted dragging both his men and Major Kong into such a disastrous situation. Major Kong, meanwhile, thought bitterly that if their informant had not betrayed them, the mission would have been a success. The enemies holding them captive were highly trained soldiers, outnumbering his unit 3-1. They had known their exact plans and ambushed them, leading to this mess. The door suddenly flung open, and one of Kang's men, Sergeant Kim, was thrown inside, beaten and bloodied. Enraged, Major Kong shouted at their captors, calling one of them a bastard. His insult earned him a smack on the head with a gun and a curse in a foreign language he could not understand. The man left grinning, while Kang's head hit the floor from the blow. Slowly lifting himself up, Kong cursed the traitor who had betrayed them. Sergeant Kim asked if he was all right, and Kong insisted he was fine before asking about the rest of the men. Kim explained that they had been taken somewhere else, but he did not know where. Before they could speak further, the same foreigner crept the door open. Kong braced himself, expecting more abuse. But to his surprise, the man was suddenly knocked to the ground by another stranger. This new figure asked if Kong was indeed Major Kong. Intrigued by the fact that the stranger spoke Korean, Kong responded with a question of his own, though he noted privately that the man's Korean sounded far from fluent. The stranger explained that he had come specifically for Kong and ordered everyone to follow him. Having no choice, Kong and the others complied. As they hurried through the passageways, Kong noticed numerous unconscious enemies lying on the ground. Shocked by the silence and efficiency, he asked the stranger which division he belonged to and how many troops had been deployed. The man replied that he could not reveal his employer, but he admitted he had come alone. Kong could hardly believe it. This single individual had taken out so many trained soldiers without raising an alarm. While they ran, Kong spotted an enemy emerging from a nearby room, certain they would be discovered. Preparing to shoot, Kong raised his weapon, but before he could fire, the mysterious man leapt forward. With startling precision, he disarmed one soldier, struck him down, and in the same instant threw a knife that pierced another's chest. Without hesitation, he then readied his gun. Kong was left stunned. The man had disabled two enemies before even drawing his weapon. Wondering just what kind of agency could produce such a fighter, the mysterious man urged them to hurry, telling them not to fire unless absolutely necessary. Kong could only watch in disbelief as the stranger ran ahead, taking out waves of hostiles with ruthless efficiency. Moving like a one-man army at a burning corner filled with more soldiers, Kong resolved to finally lend a hand. Yet once again, before he could act, the mysterious fighter charged in alone. Kong was astonished. This man showed no hesitation, no caution, only bold and reckless tactics. Sliding into the corner, the stranger raised his weapon and quickly knocked down multiple opponents before Kong could even react. Kong arrived a moment later, shocked to see the enemies already dealt with. He thought of him as a beast, though far too reckless for a soldier. Eventually, they reached the exit. Outside, the stranger halted, gesturing for everyone to stop. He ordered them to wait 1 minute in place. Kong, confused, asked why. As he looked around, he noticed the exhausted state of the professor and Sergeant Kim. Only then did he realize the stranger had calculated this rest break for their sake, something Kong himself had overlooked. Observing the man more closely, Kong noted his black eyes and his Korean, good, though not perfect. He asked if the stranger was Korean, but the only response he received was a curt order to keep moving. Reuniting with more of his men shortly after, Kong was relieved. He had believed they were taken elsewhere. His soldiers explained that the mysterious man had rescued them too and told them to wait. The stranger then directed everyone to head southwest, saying someone would be waiting for them there. Kong thanked him, but the man remained humble, claiming he was simply carrying out a commission. Kong concluded that he must be a mercenary. Grateful nonetheless, Kong stretched out his hand and told him that no matter the reason, he was thankful for saving their lives. The stranger hesitated, silently staring at the gesture. Suddenly, a flicker of light appeared behind them. Realizing the danger, the man shouted for everyone to get down. A mortar shell exploded nearby, injuring Kong and leaving him unable to hear. Disoriented, Kong checked for his men's safety. Gunfire erupted, and he turned to see the mortar crew being gunned down one by one. To his astonishment, the lone figure stood on his knees, firing with deadly accuracy. As Kong looked closer, shock spread across his face. The man who had dismantled an entire battalion with his bare hands was not a hardened veteran at all, but merely a boy. 6 months later, in a quiet high school classroom, the scene shifted. Girls whispered and blushed as they admired a new transfer student. The boy at the center of attention, however, appeared annoyed. The teacher introduced him to the class, and the student calmly announced his name. He was Ijin, the mercenary who had once been a phantom on the battlefield. In another part of the high school, a girl entered the classroom and told her friends about the new transfer student, ijin. A girl sitting apart from them wondered if they were talking about her brother. She recalled how she had once believed that her brother had died in a plane crash along with their parents. Now, after 10 long years, he finally returned. Ijin saw his family for the first time since their separation. The only family he had left were his younger sister and their grandfather. Overwhelmed, the grandfather welcomed him with open arms, crying tears of joy as he hugged the boy he never thought he would see again. Ijin's sister and he locked eyes for the first time since the accident, and in her heart, she silently questioned whether the person standing before her was truly her brother. She flinched in surprise, but when Ijin smiled warmly at her, her doubts wavered. Back in the classroom, Daeyeon, Ijin's sister, was called on aggressively by another girl. The girl complained that she had called her several times, but Daeyeon had been distracted, lost in thoughts of Ijin. Daeyeon quickly apologized, murmuring that she hadn't been paying attention. The girl then ordered her to bring her gym uniform later and demanded to know if she had it with her. When Daeyeon answered that she did, she hesitantly asked what she was supposed to wear if she gave it away. The girl smirked and, in a threatening tone, told her to repeat what she had just said, mocking her for talking back. The entire class simply watched, treating the situation like a scene from a drama. Then, the bully smacked Daeyeon on the head, telling her to mind her own business. Another girl behind her, scrolling on her phone, cursed at Daeyeon, while the bully remarked that Daeyeon had been too nice lately, and that harassing her would remind her of her place. Ashamed, Daeyeon bowed her head and remained silent. Meanwhile, Ijin was instructed by his teacher to sit in an empty seat at the back of the class. As he walked down the aisle, a boy named Jaehyung insulted him in his mind, receiving a signal from another student to humiliate him. Jaehyung stretched out his foot at just the right moment to trip him, but Ijin's reflexes stopped him inches before stumbling. Irritated, Jaehyung wondered how his plan had failed. Ijin, however, simply looked at him blankly, thinking how ridiculous it was that someone was trying to pick a fight with him on his first day of school. Remembering Major Kang's words, Ijin reminded himself not to fight. Kong had once warned him that after returning to Korea, he must stay out of trouble. Tired, Ijin muttered that he already knew. Kong, half teasing and half serious, had replied that he wasn't worried about Ijin, but rather about the poor fool who might go up against him. Back in the classroom, the teacher noticed Ijin standing for too long and asked if there was a problem. Ijin quickly smiled, apologized, and walked past Jaehyung, who insulted him and called him a loser, still unaware of who he was dealing with. Seated, Ijin was introduced to Yongchan Park, the boy sitting beside him. Yongchan quietly warned him that Jaehyung and Itaeongu were people best avoided. He then explained that their first class of the day was math. Grateful, Ijin thanked him, and Yongchan thought to himself that Ijin didn't seem like a bad guy after all when the math teacher entered. Most students were already bored or half asleep, but Ijin gazed out the window, reflecting on the years he had spent training in the wilderness. To him, this new life felt strangely peaceful. After school, Ijin waited for Daeyeon outside. Girls around them blushed as they passed him, and Daeyeon, surprised, asked if he had been waiting for her. He explained that he wanted to go home and asked if she had plans. When she admitted she didn't, he smiled and suggested they walk home together. She agreed, smiling back on their way home. Both siblings stayed silent, unsure what to say. Finally, Ijin broke the silence, admitting it felt a little awkward. Daeyeon quickly reassured him that it wasn't. He told her not to feel bad, confessing he felt the same way. He reminded her that at the time of the accident, he was only 9 years old and could hardly remember much. For her, it must have been even harder, as she had only been 7. Meanwhile, one asked if Daeon was walking home with her boyfriend. Mockingly, they sneered that Daeon couldn't possibly be dating anyone. Daeon blurted out that Ijin was her brother. Surprised, said they hadn't known she had a brother. When Ijin asked Daeon if they were her friends, she tried to explain, but one of the bullies cut her off, insulting her and making her stutter. Irritated, Ijin stared at one of the boys in the group, which angered him. The boy, feeling provoked, approached Ijin, while Daeon panicked. The boy mocked Ijin for acting tough for his sister, who was already a target of bullying. Calmly observing him, Ijin noted how carelessly the boy had left himself wide open to attack, even approaching without a weapon. Still, he remembered Kang's warning to avoid fights and sighed, debating whether to simply walk away. The bully, enraged, grabbed Ijin's collar and raised his hand to strike him. Terrified, Daeon bowed and begged for forgiveness, explaining that her brother had lived overseas most of his life and didn't understand how things worked in Korea. The boy ignored her pleas, insisting he didn't care. Seeing his sister tremble, Ijin snapped. He knocked the bully's hand away, making him cry out in pain. Taking a step toward Daeon, Ijin gently placed his jacket over her head, telling her to wait a moment. As the boy recovered and charged forward with a punch, Ijin calmly turned aside and countered with a single blow to the face, knocking him out instantly. The onlookers were stunned. The girls gasped, and the boy's friend jumped in shock. Ijin, however, only sighed, realizing he had already broken his promise to Major Kong, not even lasting a single day. The other boy's shock soon turned into fury as he cursed at Ijin, realizing too late who he had just provoked. Ijin noticed the other boy charging at him with no room for defense. Without hesitation, he struck him in the gut, sending him flying backward to the ground. The so-called annoying girl froze in shock, breaking into a cold sweat as Ijin's menacing gaze shifted toward her, making her shudder. Unexpectedly, Daeon removed her coat and called Ijin's name, wondering what had happened. However, she soon realized that the boy had been knocked out in less than a minute. Terrified, the girl trembled, expecting the same fate as the others. But instead of confronting her, Ijin walked past and turned to Daeon, asking if he had startled her. He then suggested they go to the store to buy snacks, even asking if she had any favorites. Daeon, startled, quickly replied that she was fine and there was no need. When Ijin asked again if she was sure, she fell silent. He then suggested they simply go home instead. She agreed, handed him his jacket, and he thanked her. The girl, still in shock, wondered if this was really the same person who had glared so fiercely at her only moments. Daeon, and the girl met eyes. Daeon said goodbye while Ijin gave the girl a sharp side glance. She stood frozen, still processing everything, before asking Daeon if he was really the one who had knocked those guys out. Ijin affirmed it, which surprised her even more since he didn't seem like the type to pick fights. Daeon explained that in Korea, it was considered rude to stare at people, and doing so could get him into uncomfortable situations like the one that had just occurred. Ijin calmly replied that, where he came from, meeting someone's eyes could be risky depending on the person. It could even be dangerous. Intrigued, Daeon asked why. If that was the case, he had stared at the boy earlier. Hearing this, Ijin remembered the terrified look in Daeon's eyes when she had apologized before. He explained that he had done it because they had seemed close to causing her trouble. Daeon stayed silent, processing his words, while Ijin wondered if he had said something wrong. Later that evening, after they returned home, Grandpa insisted that Ijin eat fruit rather than wash the dishes. Ijin gently refused, saying he could handle it himself, and urged Grandpa to sit and relax. With a sigh of defeat, Grandpa settled into his chair. Watching Ijin wash up, he nervously asked if dinner had been too bad. Admitting that he wasn't the best cook despite trying his best, Ijin quickly reassured him, saying the meal was delicious and that he had eaten very well. Hearing this, Grandpa looked relieved, the tension easing from his face. Daeon, sitting quietly beside him, smiled and added that although Grandpa didn't usually show it, he clearly liked the compliment. She revealed that he had even taken cooking classes to become better at preparing meals for Ijin. Grandpa turned to her with a warm smile and asked what she thought of dinner. Daeon echoed Ijin's words, saying it was wonderful. Satisfied, Grandpa turned back to Ijin and asked about his first day at school. Ijin stuttered at first, making Daeyeon flinch with worry, but he quickly composed himself and answered that it had been good. The day came to an end, and after saying goodbye to Grandpa, Ijin lay on his bed. He thought about the day he first met his grandfather, remembering how Grandpa hadn't cared about anything except the fact that he was alive. He recalled Grandpa telling him that even if he remembered nothing from his childhood, as long as he was alive, that was all that mattered. He remembered too how Grandpa had told him to eat, admitting he didn't know which food would suit him, but hoping it would taste okay. Smiling softly, Ijin closed his eyes and murmured the word family. Suddenly, his mind shifted to a memory of a plane about to crash, passengers panicking as they reached for oxygen masks. He saw himself with his parents, helping them put on oxygen masks just before the plane went down. The memory jolted him awake, gasping and sweating. Holding his face with one hand, he tried to steady his breath, convincing himself that it had only been a dream. Just then, his alarm clock rang. Hearing sounds outside his door, Ijin stepped out and found Daeyeon preparing breakfast. She told him she had been about to wake him up. Looking around, he asked where Grandpa was. She explained that he had left for work at dawn. She clarified further that Grandpa had taken time off to be home with Ijin when he first arrived, but this was his first day back at work. Waving goodbye, she mentioned she was going to school early, reminded him that breakfast was ready, and told him not to forget to eat. He thanked her, and she left. Looking at the steaming breakfast on the table, Ijin remained thoughtful. Meanwhile, at school, Daeyeon's classmates whispered. Huijin asked another girl if the new transfer student was really Daeyeon's brother. The girl confirmed it, remembering what had happened during the fight. She recalled asking one of the beaten boys if he was okay, only for him to snap back irritably, asking if he looked okay. She still couldn't believe Ijin had knocked them out with a single punch. As she thought about it, a voice behind her startled her. Huijin was demanding to know what was going on. When the girl explained the situation, she remembered Ijin's face and wondered if perhaps that was why they had stopped bullying Daeyeon. Still, she reassured herself that everything would be fine since Heejin's brother, who basically ran the school, would take care of it. Elsewhere, Daeyeon was suddenly slapped and insulted by Huijin, who accused her of overreacting. Shocked, Daeyeon asked what she wanted from her. Heejun ordered her to come with them, and when Daeyeon asked where, Huijin mocked her, questioning whether she thought everything would be fine just because her brother was around. Threatening her, she told Daeyeon to shut her mouth and follow, unless she wanted to be beaten right there and then. They dragged her to a place called the recycling station, where she was beaten and thrown against some trash. Huijin scolded her for not keeping her head down. When Daeyeon asked what she meant, Heejun snapped that she shouldn't play dumb. It was about what had happened yesterday. Daeyeon flinched at her words. Huijin accused Daeyeon's brother of acting tough, which explained why Daeyeon had the courage to talk back. She then smirked and hinted that Ijin was about to receive a special welcome at JHS High. Daeyeon was shocked and demanded to know what she meant. Huijin revealed that the boys Ijin had beaten up were actually her brother's friends. Smiling cruelly, she added that it was about time they paid Ijin a visit, implying he was about to be beaten. Daeyeon, horrified, shouted at them, asking what they planned to do to him. Huijin slapped her across the face and insulted her again. Realizing Ijin was in danger because of her, Daeyeon teared up, clenched her teeth, and suddenly bolted. The two bullies were stunned, and Huijin shouted at her not to run away. Meanwhile, in Ijin's classroom, students whispered nervously. The boys he had beaten, along with their leader, had come to take revenge. Just then, Daeyeon burst in, breathless, calling Heejun's name. Heejun turned and was stunned to see her bruised face and tattered clothes. His brother mocked him sarcastically, saying that while Ijin's sister came rushing and worried for him, his own sister only whined and begged him to do her dirty work, standing beside Daeyeon. Huijin snapped at her brother to shut up, adding that she would only worry for him if he ever got beaten by someone else. A few minutes earlier, Yangshan was smacked on the head by a fro, who shouted that it was 2 clean headshots in a row. Laughing, he told Hyekjin that he would finish Yangshan with another headshot. Hyekjin, bored, turned to the boy sitting quietly beside him and asked for his eraser. The boy reluctantly handed it over. Stomping his foot for effect, Hyekjin threw the eraser across the room, hitting Yangshan squarely on the head. He then celebrated loudly, acting as if he had just scored a perfect hit at a gaming arcade. The Afro guy, unimpressed, pointed out that it was only one shot. He then threw another eraser at Yangshan, but it bounced harmlessly away when a bag fell in front of him. Everyone turned to see Ijin, who had calmly taken his seat without reacting. The two bullies grew annoyed, whispering about teaching him a lesson and planning to call him out after school. Meanwhile, Yangshan, still shaken, called Ijin's name. Ijin asked if he was okay. Though clearly nervous and pale, Yangshan forced a smile and claimed he was fine. Leaning closer, he asked if Ijin was free after school and suggested hanging out. Ijin, however, explained that he had to walk home with his sister. Curious, Yangshan asked if she had also come from overseas. Ijin shook his head and told him that she had already been here before he returned. When Yangshan asked for her name, Ijin answered, Daeyeonyu. The moment he said it, Yangshan froze, stiff with recognition. After confirming that she was indeed Daeyeon from the first year, he admitted that he knew her. Ijin asked if that was the case, and Yangshan explained hesitantly that Daeyeon was not having an easy time at school. Confused, Ijin pressed for more details. Yangshan explained that Daeyeon had always been pretty and smart, which made her popular in middle school. Many boys liked her, and because of that, a girl became jealous and began to bully her. Ijin frowned and asked if everyone simply allowed it to happen. Yangshan lowered his voice and told him that the girl's brother was Ji-so Kim, one of the worst thugs in the school. Unfortunately, this year both Daeyeon and the bully had ended up in the same homeroom, making things even worse. He added that it had gotten so bad that people often wondered how Daeyeon still managed to come to school every day. Ijin then asked if the bullying had started simply because the girl liked a boy who, in turn, liked Daeyeon. Yangshan nodded, saying that conflicts like this often began with petty reasons, and people like them didn't need much of an excuse to pick on someone, something he himself understood all too well at that moment. Ijin remembered a conversation from before school had started. Grandpa had asked him if he was ready for his first day and hoped he would adjust well. Ijin had told him not to worry, but Grandpa had admitted that he wasn't sure what to expect since Ijin had spent so much time overseas. Grandpa then turned to Daeyeon and asked if she was doing well in school. She smiled and answered that she was fine, which made Grandpa beam with pride. He told Ijin not to worry about her because she was a great student, something even her teachers often said. Remembering that moment, Ijin recalled how Daeyeon's expression had briefly faltered despite her reassuring words. Lost in thought, Ijin stayed silent until Yangshan asked if he was okay. Ijin nodded, thanked him for sharing, and assured him that he was fine. Yangshan, still worried, reminded him that everyone at school knew about it anyway and told him not to dwell too much on it. Suddenly, the door was kicked open, startling everyone. The boy Ijin had beaten earlier entered with Ji-so's gang following behind him. Hyekjin muttered in disbelief, wondering why they were there. Ji-so smirked and replied that he had come to take care of some business, specifically, beating Ijin up. Both Jae-hyung and Hyekjin looked confused until the beaten boy whispered, "That's him." Pointing at Ijin, Ji-so looked Ijin up and down and asked mockingly if a scrawny kid like him had really taken them out. The boys stammered that they had only been caught off guard. Ji-so scoffed at their excuses, scratching his ear and insulting them for their incompetence. He then called out to Ijin, mockingly ordering him to step forward. Ijin rose from his seat calmly, making Yangshan mutter his name in fear. The Afro dude then thinks that no matter what Ijin had done before, he was finished now. Ijin, unfazed, asked if the thug in front of him was Ji-so Kim. Ji-so smirked, surprised that Ijin already knew his name. But his smirk faded when Ijin's sharp, unflinching stare bore into him. Irritated, Ji-so ordered one of his lackeys, who had already been beaten once, to take care of him. Before the lackey could act, the classroom door burst open again. Daeyeon ran in, panting, and called out Ijin's name. Ji-so turned toward her with a mocking laugh. He remarked that while Ijin's sister rushed to defend him, his own sister only nagged him to run errands. Standing beside Daeyeon, Ijin snapped at him to shut up, saying she would only worry about him if he ever actually got beaten by someone. Ijin then turned on Daeyeon, insulting her and complaining that she had made her run all over the school. Daeyeon, panicked by the scene, apologized to Ijin, telling him it was her fault for dragging him into this mess. Huijin scoffed and dismissed her words as overdramatic. Ijin, however, looked at Daeyeon and told her firmly that she had nothing to apologize for. Without hesitation, he struck the lackey in the face, sending him crashing to his knees. Gasps of shock spread through the room. Calmly, Ijin told Daeyeon that they should be the ones apologizing, not her. The fat boy, still not learning his lesson, charged at Ijin with a heavy punch. But Ijin sidestepped, grabbed his arm, and slammed a palm into his chest. The boy gagged, dropping to his knees as he clutched his throat. Another gang member lunged, but Ijin dodged again and delivered a brutal strike to his side, knocking him to the ground. Everyone froze in disbelief. Even Ji-So stood stunned, unable to process what had just happened. Daeyeon, Huijin, and the others all stared, wide-eyed. Then, in a chillingly calm tone, Ijin turned his gaze on Ji-So and said he had heard that his sister had been suffering because of him. Ji-So flinched under his stare, his smirk faltering, while Ijin's expression remained cold and unwavering. Ji-So eventually composed himself, admitting that Ijin wasn't just some pushover. With a smirk, he swung his leg high, aiming for Ijin's head. When the kick landed, he thought he had nailed him, but to his shock, Ijin had calmly blocked the strike and was staring at him with cold eyes, annoyed. Ji-So swung his other leg, convinced that this time Ijin wouldn't expect it. But once again, Ijin effortlessly stopped the attack, grabbed his leg, and drove a powerful punch straight into his face. Ji-So was thrown backward, landing hard on the ground. He cursed under his breath, clutching his bleeding nose, then looked up only to find our boy towering over him with a menacing stare. A moment later, Ijin delivered a sharp kick to his head, knocking him out cold. The entire classroom froze in silence. Jaehyung and Hyekjin gasped in disbelief, unable to process that Ji-So had been knocked out by a single student. Even Huijin's face twisted with shock as her eyes darted toward Ijin. He took a step forward, and both girls instinctively flinched in fear. Huijin, trembling, wondered silently if he was going to hit her too, but before Ijin could move further, Daeyeon grabbed his arm and pleaded for him to stop. Confused, he asked if these people hadn't bullied her all this time, including today. Startled by his awareness, Daeyeon asked how he knew. In her mind, she questioned if he was really fighting for her. Then, despite the tears in her eyes, she smiled faintly and told him she was fine, urging him to stop. Seeing her expression, Ijin finally relented. He told her that he would walk her back to her homeroom, and she agreed. Together, they stepped outside as the room buzzed with whispers. Inside, Jaehyung sank into his seat, muttering that Ijin was pretty hardcore and thinking it was a good thing they hadn't tried anything against him. Otherwise, they might have ended up like Ji-So. Huijin, however, grew furious. She insulted her brother and his gang for being humiliated by a single guy. Meanwhile, as the siblings walked, Daeyeon cautiously remarked that Ijin was really good at fighting, admitting that it had shocked her. Ijin gave a simple nod. She then apologized again. When Ijin asked why, she lowered her head and explained that it was her fault he had gotten dragged into this mess, and that he had even fought the day before because of her. Ijin, smiling faintly, told her not to say that. He explained that it was supposed to be this way. Daeyeon looked confused, prompting him to elaborate. He said that back where he had lived, people only cared about their own interests. No one wanted to get involved with others as long as they themselves didn't suffer. But there was one exception when it came to family. Only then did people act differently. His words cut into a memory. Ijin recalled the sound of gunshots and explosions, soldiers running for their lives on a battlefield. In the midst of chaos, he had once seen a man shielding a little girl with his own body. Back then, Ijin had wondered what family truly meant and why it seemed so important to people. Back in the present, Daeyeon told him that he barely remembered her or grandpa. Ijin admitted it was true, saying he didn't recall much from their past. Still, he added firmly that it didn't change the fact that they were family. His words startled her, and she quickly assured him that she was fine before reminding him to return to his class. When he tried to protest, saying he would walk her to her homeroom, she pointed to the door they were already standing at. Smiling, she slipped inside and told him she would see him later. Watching her go, Ijin couldn't help but smile as well. When he returned to his classroom, silence greeted him. Jaehyung immediately changed his tune, loudly praising Ijin for beating Jiaiso and wondering what kind of training people received overseas. Hyekjin agreed, echoing Jaehyung's admiration. Ijin only sighed and took his seat. Yangshan leaned closer and told him that he also thought what he did was impressive. Hearing this, Ijin smiled faintly. Elsewhere, Jaiso's gang gathered, the atmosphere heavy. Jiaiso slammed his hand down on the table, making all his men flinch in fear. He admitted to himself that there was something different about Ijin, noting that he didn't fight like a typical school thug. Huijin, irritated, sighed and asked if he was really just going to sit there. She insisted that Ijin had only caught them off guard, calling him a moron and mocking the gang for letting one guy humiliate them. The gang stayed silent, unsure of what to say. Jaiso's expression darkened. He snapped at her to shut her mouth and challenged her to fight herself if she thought it was so easy. Huijin recoiled in shock, telling him not to take out his frustration on her just because he had been beaten. Jaiso's glare hardened as he ordered her to repeat herself. Tears welled up in her eyes as she turned away, storming out of the room and slamming the door behind her. She stomped through the corridor with her lackey trailing nervously behind. Muttering curses, she seethed with anger, her mind flashing with the image of Ijin and Daeyeon. Jealousy twisted her thoughts. When she finally reached her homeroom, she shoved the door open violently, startling the girls inside. Her eyes immediately locked onto Daeyeon. With a venomous tone, she remarked that Daeyeon was damn lucky, able to come to school carefree because she could always run to her big brother for protection. She asked loudly for confirmation, but Daeyeon stayed quiet. That silence only enraged Huijin further. In her mind, she trembled with anger, feeling mocked by Daeyeon's refusal to respond. She convinced herself that, because of the situation, she could no longer touch Daeyeon. And yet, it felt like Daeyeon was still looking down on her. The thought made her refuse to stay silent. I will like you to not refuse a like and subscribe if you want more content. Stay tuned and ciao.